Okay, we are holding page Yud Gimel, top of the page, line 5, and we were speaking about the idea of simcha. That how does simcha fit in with the bittul that a person has to be betachlis? Simcha is about ispashtus. Simcha is about expansion. We're talking here about toivim the dechem yayin. Yayin goes on simcha. So what is the idea of simcha that there is with this wine and so on? Seemingly, why would that be an appropriate thing? He goes on to explain the Yuva on line 5, page Gimel, apia bir mashakosov, according to the explanation of what it says. Yosvan Novim Bavai Simchon, that the those that are humble in Hashem will increase in joy, in simcha. Or later on, we'll explain that they increase in Havaya. Depends how we're going to, different ways of explaining this. The simcha but we need to understand the classic question that is brought down with Mark Siddur. What's the connection between humility and being humble and modest with the idea of joy? Seemingly, they are opposite approaches, opposite lines, the way Chassidus uses the terms. So it means it's opposite types of service. The idea behind this is, first we need to define what humility is. When we define what humility is, then we can understand eventually how this is not contradictory to the idea of joy. He says that humility is not that he feels low because of how deficient he is, because of what he is lacking. That is not the true idea of humility. That the person is humble because they, for whatever reason, do not find any good in their nefesh. Rather, he has the qualities, he has certain advantages, and he knows and he's aware of them. Rather, despite the fact that he recognizes what qualities and advantages he has, he doesn't recognize, he doesn't consider himself something is important and special because of those advantages and qualities. Similar to what it says by Ish Moshe Anav Moed Mikol Adam, that says that the person Moshe was the most humble person from all man. Meaning, though he knew his qualities over every person. I mean, sometimes we can have qualities that we're not aware of. But Moshe Rabbeinu cannot have been completely not aware of the fact that he was the only one that spoke with the Eibishter, and he went up to Shemayim for 40 days and 40 nights and didn't eat and didn't drink, and he was there, spoke to Hashem face to face, and he was there 40 days, 40 nights 3 times, and all the miracles that Hashem performed through him in Mitzrayim, and afterwards at Kriyas Yamsuf, and afterwards all the things in the wilderness. So how can we say that he was humble? Obviously, humility does not mean that a person fools themselves. This is what Chassidus calls fooling oneself, is called shiflus shel sheker. In Yiddish, they call it the dry keppel dik shin, a 3-headed shin, because it's 3 times 3 letters shin in that phrase, shiflus shel sheker. So it doesn't mean that the person is not aware of their qualities, but rather the idea of humility means that he is aware of what he's accomplished, just like Moshe Rabbeinu knew full well that he went up in Har Sinai and he brought the Yidden the Torah, and he took the Yidden out of Mitzrayim. But with that, and alongside with that, he doesn't consider all those qualities that he has accomplished as a reason to hold himself important and hold himself of value, like we'll soon explain. But the reason for this is, why is that so? Line 15. The Rebbe says parenthetically, in addition, what's explained in a different place, the primary humility that Moshe Rabbeinu had was in the face and in comparison to the generation of the heels of Mashiach, their service in the way of self-sacrifice. So when Moshe Rabbeinu saw the self-sacrifice and how Yidden literally gave up their lives and were willing to give up their lives for Torah mitzvahs, especially during the generation before the coming of Mashiach. So that made him feel humble, even all of his great qualities and all the great miracles that were performed through him, taking the Yinar Mitzrayim and all the miracles in the wilderness, and even being in the Hashem's presence and Har Sinai and all that, in his mind and his perception, all of this paled in significance in comparison to the self-sacrifice that we experienced before Mashiach comes. And the Rebbe also in some places explains, I don't remember if he explains it concerning the humility of Moshe Rabbeinu, but it could be he does, that even in our generation, where we don't, Baruch Hashem, suffer physically for being a Yid, but the emotional suffering, meaning the idea of al yevish mipnei amaligim, not to be embarrassed from those that scoff against religion and belief in Hashem, and still in all, we are willing to stand up strong for our beliefs. That is also a Mesiras Nefesh that Moshe Rabbeinu felt he was humble before. And again, I'm not sure if the Rebbe brings it down concerning this, but definitely he brings down that that is also one component of the Mesiras Nefesh of the times before Mashiach's coming, that despite the fact that there are scoffers and Torah mitzvahs, still in all, we have the pride and the fortitude to keep up doing what we're doing. But that is parenthetical. What is the main thing that Rebbe is explaining over here about the humility of Moshe Rabbeinu? The feature Yada Shazam Mashnit Lamaila, because Moshe Rabbeinu knew that all these advantages that he had, all these miracles that he performed, etc., these were gifts that he was given from above. And therefore, his humility was not just that he felt that not only did he feel that if another person would have been given the same advantages that he would have been given, someone else would have, if Hashem would have appeared to someone else, and if someone else was born in such a spiritual, pure state that the house was filled with light as soon as they were born, showing on the purity of their body, etc., so then they would have surely attained the same level that Moshe Rabbeinu attained. But then there's no reason for humility. Then he doesn't have a reason for pride, to feel more prideful and boastful than anybody else and more arrogant than anybody else. But in addition to that, Moshe Rabbeinu felt humble before everyone else, as if someone else would have done a better job. The Rebbe adds that the humility of Moshe Rabbeinu was, if someone else would have been given his gifts, if Hashem would have spoken to someone else, etc., they would have performed Moshe Rabbeinu's job better than him. And that's why he was humble before every person upon the earth. By days, bonus through this meditation, so then every single person could be humble from kol ha'adam, afilu min nachri, even from a non-Jew. In that Sefer Amarim, the Alter Rebbe adds that that's what it means, that Moshe Rabbeinu was anav moed mikol ha'adam. The Rebbe in Tanya, in Perek Lamed, where it speaks about and elaborates on this statement in Pirkei Avos of Ishval Ruach B'fnei Kol Ha'adam, with a hey idea, the Rebbe over there explains that when it says Adam alone, Adam Atem Kriyim Adam, that means only Jewish people. When it says Ha-Adam, for whatever reason, so when it adds that extra hey, that comes to include not just Jewish people, but also non-Jews. So he says that in the pasuk it says Vayish Moshe Anav Moed Mikol Ha-Adam, and in the Girsa in Pirkei Avos where it says Vayish Val Roch B'fnei Kol Ha-Adam, what a hey idea. That means that a person has the capability to be humble even before a non-Jew, based on this type of approach and this type of appreciation of the idea that the gifts that were given to him were something from above. So the Rebbe explains, line 25, in what way does he feel humble before everybody? He called him because his entire faith and belief in the one God, he believes is not on his own, but rather because we inherited it from Avraham Avinu, like it speaks about in Perek Ches and Tanya, that the reason why we have the belief in the Eibishter, that is something that comes out of our inheritance, because the Eibishter gave it as a gift to Avraham Avinu that he would impart it to his children afterwards, and we have it as a Yerusha. So therefore, since we have it as an inheritance, so it's just like Moshe Rabbeinu thought about all of his gifts. all of the gifts he believed was a gift. All of his qualities were only a gift from above. Therefore, he has no reason to be arrogant, and he also felt that he would have been more, if someone else would have been given these gifts, he would have been more successful and used them out better than he did. In a similar vein, the idea that we believe in Hashem and we have the capability, we are Yidden and so on and so forth, there's also a gift that was given to us from above. And if not for the fact that we were given this gift as via inheritance from Avraham Avinu, we would have been just like the non-Jews. So therefore, we have to have humility even before a guy. Now the Rebbe is going to elaborate upon this even more. Line 27, close to the bottom of the page. We can explain the novelty and uniqueness concerning the humility and the humbleness that a person is supposed to have before every person, even from a non-Jew. We know it's brought down in different places that the reason why a non-Jew is actually in the form of a human similar to a Yid is really so we should be able to have Bechira Chavshis. The classic thing, of course, is the famous thing that the reason why we have the indentation over the lip is because the Malach makes us forget the Torah. So the question is, so why is the Goy have that? Because there has to be Bechira Chavshis. If the Goy would look different than a Yid, so then we'd say, here you see there's a proof for the fact that there's an Eibishter and Yidden are given the Torah and so on and so forth. The same thing in many regards, the whole entire shape of the Yid's body reflects the spiritual realms above, reflects the intellect ruling over the heart, etc., etc. And many of these things don't really apply by a Goy Lahavdil. So therefore, why does a non-Jew have the same physical features, the same physical makeup like a Jew? Because it has to be Bechira Chavshis. You should choose in life. But on his own, Chassidus used the term concerning Klippa, that Klippa is an existence of not. It's an existence of a non-existence. What does that mean? It says that in the Medrash, it says that the Eibishter, before the creation of the world, we're holding the top of page Yudalid, that before the creation of the world, he was creating worlds and he was destroying them. And he would say, Dein loy hanyanli. These are not something that I desire, that I want. I do not like them, etc. And Chassidus explains that these destroyed worlds, that's the world of Tayu. And the destruction of the world of Tayu resulted in, through the Shviras HaKelim, through the breaking of the vessels, the whole idea of Klippus. Comes out that the entire idea of Klippus, including the Goyim that are from Shalosh Satmeis, and or at least from Klippus Noige, even the better one. So then they are coming from a level that Hashem said, I do not want. In other words, they are really a non-existent existence. They're coming from the not wanting of Hashem. In another place in Chassidus, it explains at great length that Hashem's will is so powerful, or the Rebbe explains about this as well. Hashem's will is so powerful that even from not wanting something, from consciously not wanting something, that creates a metzias of an unwanted thing. Whatever that means, I'm not going to get into that right now. So Goyim fall into that category, like the rest of Klippus. They are an existence of lack, an existence of heder. So if the metzias of the Goy is the metzias shal heder, and the Rebbe asks if so, how is it possible to have true humility, al pi Torah's emes, according to the Torah of truth? The Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, and I believe the Rebbe emphasized this in his commentary on Tanya, the Alter Rebbe in Tanya doesn't want anything fake. It doesn't mean we shouldn't do things fake until we get it true. But the Alter Rebbe in Tanya always shoots for the idea of truth. And the Alter Rebbe in Tanya many times will add to have this in this particular midah, whatever midah he's talking about, be'emes. The same thing in Perek Lamed, where he talks about the Alter Rebbe adds how it could be be'emes, how he could truly feel humble before every person, not just act humbly or speak humbly or comport yourself as if you're humble, but to actually feel and recognize and have that type of attitude and belief that you are really humble before everybody. So if Torah's Emes says, the Torah of truth says that a person has to have true humility. It's not a fake, it's not a fake out, it's not a fraud, it's not false, it's real before even a guy. How's that possible? How is it possible for one to truly have this experience if in regards to a guy, that his existence is not even a true existence, like we said before. Afal became, the Rebbe says, still in all, he's born in Isha Israel, a Yid has to think into the existence of a guy Kafishi Bashwal, the Messiah Shalom, in comparison to his existence. And in this, the person will become inspired to have a feeling of humility. So the question is, how is that possible? The Rebbe goes on to explain in line 7, but the point of the matter, and this is, that's through meditating in the root of the matters above. In other words, don't look at the guy down here below, look at the source of the guy in Olam Masal. Like it's explained concerning the copper snake, that when there was the time when the Yidden complained and the snakes and scorpions and so on killed the Yidden, so Moshe Rabbeinu erected put up a stick with a copper snake on top, and the Yidden would look at the snake and through that be healed. So it says that that says it wasn't the snake itself, but Chazal say that through looking up at the snake, they were really looking upwards at Hashem. And by looking upwards at Hashem, they were being healed. So Chassidus explains, what's it mean that they were looking upwards at Hashem? Through the snake. So what's you want to look upwards at Hashem? Make something else. What's the idea about looking upwards at Hashem through a snake? It's by meditating on the root of the snake, which is also the idea of the Noch Shakadmoini, the primordial serpent, the idea of Klippa in general, which is symbolized by the snake in Gan Eden and by other Marishan. This means he thinks into the fact also the existence of bad down below, in its root above is really good. And because of this, when a Yid thinks into this source of bad down here, that it's good, is bonus. Could also be the meditation in the existence of a guy. He thinks into the source of the guy above. Through that came down his existence down here below. That now down here below he becomes a true existence, an important existence. What's the truth and what's the reality of his existence down here? That is truth and reality is to extract and evoke by the Yid a greater avodah, that through the guy, because of his shayrish above, the shayrish above of the guy is to help the Yid out in his avodah, like the shayrish of Klippa is, that we should be able to have ubacharta b'chayim. So the reason why in other words, the true intention of the creation of the guy down here. Though down here we said he's a Metzias Shal Heder, he's a Metzias of not still and all in his root. He is there to challenge the Yid and evoke by the Yid a greater connection with Hashem and a greater humility that comes from being humble even before the guy. Now we're going to lead back to the original point that we were talking about. How can humility and joy live together? Seemingly they're contradictory. So he says the general idea of humility is connected with joy. Because when a person is lacking a feeling and awareness of self, and he doesn't give himself importance and value in the regards of holding himself egotistical and so on, therefore he knows that he is not owed anything. He's not supposed to have anything. And everything and anything that he's given, he is satisfied with it. He is not looking for more. He believes anything he has is a gift. And he's very joyful with it. So here we see the direct relationship between humility and joy. If a person values themselves and thinks they are important, so then therefore they believe they are owed something. And if they are owed something, so then they are not necessarily happy with anything. They feel if I'm owed something, I'm supposed to get more and so on. But if a person is truly humble, then they feel anything they get is a gift and they're joyful and they're happy with that gift of anything that they have.
But it's not the kisupa.
That's a different question we've addressed on a different time. Because after all said and done, this itself is through avoida that a person attains that. So therefore, it's not nama de ksuv. Let's then move on line 22. From this understood. The true idea of a godly joy, which is what we're talking about over here. How can joy in Kedusha be in such a type of way that it's not contradictory to humility? So he says, he's simcha pshuta alakus. It's a pure joy about and of godliness. Lishum hergish atzma, without any feeling of self. He completely loses himself in the experience of godliness, and that is what he is joyful about. The joy is in such a way that he completely nullifies his essence. His joy is not because of how good his service is. Some people have joy because of all that I've accomplished. And I'm not saying that's a wrong type of joy, but that's not the ultimate state of joy. His joy is actually because he totally identifies with godliness, and his joy is because of Hashem's expression and being and existence. In other words, it's not what I got or what I accomplished, but it's totally the experience of godliness. The same as he says in line 27, even more so, that in godliness itself, the joy will be as a result of his being nullified before Hashem's very essence. So now the Rebbe adds that when a person's joy is from his bittul, or the joy is because he lacks any other metzias, the whole metzias that he feels is Hashem's very essence. So now we're saying that now Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei gains from that joy. This is what we said before in the pasuk, that doesn't just mean that those that are humble in Hashem will increase in simcha, but the humble will increase in Havaya. Let's see it inside. Bottom of this page, going on to page Tezvav. This is the meaning of what it says. That the humble ones will increase in Hashem through simcha, because they make an increase in Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, because since they are tapping in and they're bitless Hashem's very essence, and Shem Havaya is a lower level, so therefore they are drawing down through connecting with the level of Hashem's essence with their joy and their bittul, so they are drawing down from Atzmos and adding into Shem Havaya. That's what it means, V'yosva novim b'Havaya simcha, that the humble ones will add and increase in Havaya, they will increase a higher level. The Rebbe goes even more in depth, line 2, through having humility in the utmost state of bittul. That itself makes the joy it to be in such a way that it's broadness and expansiveness. Beforehand, we asked that the broadness and expansiveness of joy seemingly is contradictory to the humility of when a person is constricted and contracted and so on. Here he's saying just the opposite. If you remember, we spoke about before that Bina, all the details and all the expansiveness of Bina is a result of the fact that its source is from the true unity and the oneness of Hashem. In a similar vein over here, the more bottle, the higher the bittul, and the higher the connection to Hashem's essence, so the greater expansion there is in the simcha. How come? Isn't expansiveness a sign of ego? He says that's only a sign of ego when the expansiveness is associated with me. It's my expansiveness. But since this is not the broadness and expansiveness of my mitzias, it's not the person's own expansiveness. It's not his ego that's expanding, but he is not a separate existence whatsoever. He's completely nullified. So this expansiveness of simcha is actually something else. I'll call Mitziyusi and Mitzias the Lamaila. His entire being is the being of above. So really, what is his expansiveness? What is he feeling over here? His broadness and being so expansive? That's really Hashem's expansiveness. And therefore he could be B'simcha. If it would be his expansiveness, his simcha, so then that would be contradictory to humility. But if he's completely bottled, so it's not his expansiveness, it's Hashem's expansiveness. So there's an expression that the Rebbe used to use by Fabrengens often. It says, "Vayigbal liboy b'darchei havaya." One's not supposed to be arrogant, but then there's a level that his heart is raised up in the ways of Hashem. In other words, if a person is completely nullified, so then his pride is not his own pride, and his seemingly lofty state, it's not about him being lofty and being higher. It's expressive of the Eibishter. Similar to what the Rebbe often brings the Maimer Chazal, Eved Melech Melech, that the servant of a king is a king. I'll say when the servant of the king walks into the room to make an announcement, everybody hushes. Why? Because of the servant? No, the servant is only a servant. But it's what the servant represents. The servant is not his own Metzias. The servant is an extension of the king. So the reason why they stand up and they give honor to the servant is because of the king. The Rabbi Reichel Vashalom used to chazer the story about his father, that Rabbi Twersky in one of the Midwestern states was always wondering about the fact that when Rabbi Reichel Vashalom's father, Nachman Shmuel David HaLevi, used to travel, he used to go up to Mizrach, and everybody knew, including this Rabbi Twersky, realized that Rabbi Reichik was like a total bittul de Yid, as those who knew him knew completely did not take up any space whatsoever. And yet, he's going right away, he goes running to Mizrach. Where does this come from? Afterwards, they found out that the Frierdiker Rebbe told and instructed Rabbi Reichik, Nachman Shmuel David HaLevi, that wherever you go, you should realize that you are representing me. And therefore, because you're representing me, if I would be there, I would go to Mizrach, so you have to go as well. So Rabbi Reichik, in all of his, Rabbi Reichik Sr., in all of his humility, or not just in all of, or despite all of his humility, but because of all of his humility, one may say, he did not occupy a single bone of his body, was not about himself. It was all about the Frierdiker Rebbe and his wishes. And therefore, because it was all about the Frierdiker Rebbe and his wishes, he took this place at the head of the shul in Mizrach, because it wasn't his honor that he was doing over here, it was the Rebbe's honor. And the same thing, someone that's truly humble can have a true ispashtus and a true joy, because he really represents the honor and the height and the expansiveness of Hashem. Any questions?
So the joy itself is simply because we're Jew?
The joy itself is